Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. Kevin Rogers with you for Thursday, February 18th. A lot to go over on today's edition of the Daily Insider, the live stream that we have here every afternoon from Monday through Friday that we started this week. And we're going to continue this obviously after today, but moving forward. And you can find it in the afternoon and find the replay also on VegasInsider.com and also on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. Let's take a look now at last night's NBA before we look ahead to tonight's NBA with the three-game card. And the big story last night, just the comebacks all over the NBA. And we're going to start with the Utah Jazz as granted, they were only down by 5 at the half to a shorthanded Clippers team, but Utah now 20-1 in their last 21 games after they beat the Clippers 114-96. They were laying 7 points last night. So no Kawhi, no Paul George, and the Clippers, who had beaten the Heat a few nights earlier, they end up losing this game. You see the second half there as Utah puts up 68 in the second half. They win 114-96. So Utah wins again, they cover again, and they keep on rolling atop the Northwest Division. Meanwhile, the other late game last night, in case you missed it, way late, the Heat, they were up by 14 points with about 6 minutes left on Golden State. The Warriors came back and tied it, and Steph Curry was huge in overtime as the Warriors beat the Heat 120-112 to cover as 1.5-point favorites. And Golden State, they end up going 3-1 on this homestand. The only loss came to Brooklyn, but they won all three as a favorite. Golden State's actually, they played well. I know they're doing it now. Draymond's hurt, and obviously Klay Thompson's not there. They head out east for this road trip in which, look, it's not crazy to go 3-1 if you're Golden State. Orlando is a bit dinged up. Charlotte's been dealing with the COVID issue, so they're sitting out right now. The Knicks are up and down. Indiana may not be easy, but Golden State's got a lot of road games coming up here over the next few weeks before the All-Star break. And you look at the Miami Heat, they had a chance to get James Harden, and they totally whiffed on that one. I don't know how close they were, but to hold on to their young pieces and not get James Harden didn't make a lot of sense. And when you look at what they've done, they've lost 3 straight on this road trip to the Warriors, Clippers, and Jazz. They get Sacramento tonight. We'll talk about that in a second. Then the Lakers on Saturday night. The Heat just have not been good. And, after that run to the finals last year, it seems like a one-hit wonder for Miami. In the other action last night in the NBA, the Magic down early to the Knicks, but they come back and win that game 107-89. A good win for Orlando. They've got a bunch of injuries they're dealing with Aaron Gordon out, and also Cole Anthony is sidelined. So they were down early, and they held the Knicks to 33 points there in the second half. Denver, look at this. Denver's up 17 at Washington against the terrible Wizards, and they give up 46 in the second quarter. They lose that game to Washington 130-128. Break up the Wizards. They've won 3 in a row. Look at this. Boston, Houston, Denver. That's a pretty good ending to that homestand, which had an ugly loss to Toronto, an ugly loss to the Knicks. And now Washington heads out west for 4 very difficult games with Portland, the Lakers, Clippers on a back-to-back, and then Denver. That's not going to be easy for Washington, but good for them that they finally got a few wins in a row here in Denver. Now back-to-back losses on the road after they lost at Boston the night before. We're going to jump over here to the Celtics, and they beat Denver 2 nights ago, and they come out last night and lose to Atlanta as 2-point favorites. Kemba Walker didn't play in that game, but Atlanta finally shows up, 122-114. Trae Young had a huge game for the Hawks, and you see this 5-game losing streak, or 4 games, I can't count, 4, 7, so 1-7 in the stretch in February. 1-7 for the Hawks before they won last night. They get Boston again coming up tomorrow night, but it's funny, to get up 114 points and you would think, all right, that's not good defensively or defensive effort, I should say, but look at the other defensive efforts here. If you want to call them efforts or just showing up. 123, 125, 125, 118, 121. So this is a team that does not play defense, but at least their offense finally showed up. And look, they got to score in the 120s, Atlanta, if they're going to be competitive. All these losses, except for here with Brooklyn, if they don't score in the 120s, they don't have a shot. And that's really tough to say. But the Hawks there, that's a good win for them on the road. How about Houston? They were down in this one by 26 at the half. Ben Simmons didn't play. Joel Embiid was back for the Sixers. 69 to 43, excuse me. 69-43 at the half, down 26 at the half, the Rockets. Getting 8, or let's flip it around if you're Philly, laying 8. And they don't cover. You got to really be kicking yourself for that one. As the Rockets scored 70 in the second half, they lose by 5, so they get the cover there. After Houston was on, well, now they've lost 7 straight, but they were on an 0-6 ATS run before that, and they end up getting the cover. And Philly wins to end a 3-game skid from the end of their road trip, but they've had problems covering of late. And the 76ers are great at home. They get Chicago coming up on Friday, but just, I don't know how you're up by that many points against that Houston team and you can't cover. Portland, good win at New Orleans last night. They cover as 4-point dogs. They've won all 3 games on their current road trip. They won at Dallas, they won at Oklahoma City, and now at New Orleans. And the Pelicans continue to be a terrible home favorite this season. As you see here, they did get the win against Houston, but they lost to Sacramento. They beat Washington, but before that, 3 straight losses there as a favorite, and the non-cover against San Antonio. So they still have been a lousy home favorite. Now they got Phoenix coming up, and they beat Phoenix as a dog last time they played them, so we'll see what happens this time. And Indiana, nice little front door cover against Minnesota in overtime, 134-128. You see this second quarter, 70 points. There were 72 points here. So an easy over, even though, look at that. You go from 70 in the second to 36 points in the third quarter. I mean, how terrible is that? If you think, oh, I'm cruising along with the over, and you get a 36-point quarter. But at least they were all right. They got the over there. And for Indiana, bouncing back from that overtime loss to Chicago, they won 3 of 4. I mean, Indiana's still hanging around in that Central Division, even though right now, look, Detroit's out of it, Cleveland's out of it, Chicago, they're kind of, this game last night against Detroit, I mean, Chicago, they're the 3rd best team in that division. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But Detroit was up by 25 points in the second quarter of this game. Chicago came all the way back and won. They actually pushed. Zach LaVine had a missed free throw in the final seconds that would have put the Bulls up 4. But how about Detroit scores 12 points in the third quarter? I mean, they were awful offensively. They got a little bit of offense towards the end there, but Chicago down 25, they win that game. And Memphis, they pull away from Oklahoma City, outscoring the Thunder by 8 in the fourth quarter. So Memphis bounces back from the loss to New Orleans from a few nights ago. So that is the big look at last night's NBA. Tonight, not as much, but the key game, though, we'll start with the 7:35 Toronto-Milwaukee. And the Bucks have totally spiraled out of control, at least of late. I mean, again, they're still the favorites to win the Central Division. But 4 consecutive losses, Phoenix, Utah, OKC, and Toronto. They were tied with Toronto at the half in this game and then fell apart in the second half. They got the Raptors again. Big homestand. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You should win all those games here in Milwaukee. Then you got Clippers, Nuggets. This is a good time for the Bucks to bounce back. But Toronto ended a 2-game skid with their win over the Bucks a few nights ago. Brooklyn and LA coming up at Staples Center. Kevin Durant's still out. Kyrie Irving is back tonight for the Nets. So you got Kyrie and Harden against LeBron and his crew because there's no Anthony Davis. He's out for a while with that Achilles injury. And the Lakers are 2.5-point favorites. Brooklyn, they come in playing very well on the road. Golden State, Sacramento, Phoenix, all victories. Look at all the point totals they put up. And easily went over the total in these 2 high total games. And then they were down 24 to Phoenix. They come back and win that game behind James Harden. And now they're a dog again against the Lakers tonight. And LA, they have not been very profitable as a home favorite as they they did beat Denver and cover that. Didn't cover against Detroit in the overtime win. A couple overtime wins against OKC. And this one, they got down big to Memphis, and they won by 10, laying 8.5. They just beat the Timberwolves 2 nights ago, covering the 6.5. And again, playing without Anthony Davis. But the Lakers, this is a big one here, February 24th at Utah. That should be interesting considering they have not played each other yet this year. It's kind of a good test for the Jazz. But Lakers laying 2.5 against Brooklyn. And you see where the side money or the side is going in the money up here. So we'll see how that one breaks up later. Miami at Sacramento. And the Heat, with that awful meltdown last night, they play the Kings. And Sacramento has lost all 4 games in their homestand. Lost by 8 to Philly, 11 to shorthanded Orlando, 14 to Memphis, 11 to Brooklyn. So they're not losing close games. And look at the defense. 119, 123, 124, 136. So they have been terrible defensively of late, the Kings. And this is the last game of their homestand before they go on the road. And the last time they played the Heat back on January 30th, they covered as 4.5-point dogs, 105-104 loss. Game stayed way under the total of 225. And tonight's total 227. So it moves up a couple points. Now you're kind of curious that, you're going to have a high-scoring game. The Heat went over last night because the game went to overtime against Golden State. And, again, terrible loss for the Heat last night there in San Francisco. Now they make the short trip to Sacramento. College basketball. Let's look at last night really quick. NC State, nice win on the road in the afternoon against Pittsburgh. And Marquette blew out Butler. Marquette has 2 wins in the last, I believe it's 8 games, and both came against Butler. And they were terrible ATS. They covered against Seton Hall on Sunday. But nice bounce back for Marquette. And look who they played here. Creighton, Villanova, Seton Hall, the top 3 teams in the Big East. Now you play Butler, getting 2. And Marquette routs them. UCF beats USF, the I-4 battle. That was a revenge game for the Knights. Kentucky held off Vanderbilt 82-78. So all of a sudden now Kentucky, look, they're not going to the tournament, but they've won 2 in a row, and they barely covered that 3.5. Depends where you got it, 3.5, 4, where it closed. But Kentucky ends up pulling off the season sweep of Vanderbilt. So let's throw a parade for John Calipari. USC over Arizona State. USC continues to roll. The Trojans open it up in the second half. And now for USC, that's 7 straight wins for them. And they miss out on that Oregon game because of COVID. But at least USC, a couple dominant efforts here, including that win against UCLA. They got UCLA again coming up. They get Arizona this weekend. And Arizona goes to UCLA. We'll talk about that in a second. Kansas wins again, 4th straight win for the Jayhawks. They beat up K-State. Kansas really hasn't played a lot of good competition recently. They beat Iowa State twice and K-State, but got to take the wins while you get them. DePaul put up a really good effort last night. Up 4 at the half, getting 14. They lose to Seton Hall, but good to see DePaul at least competing in that game. They haven't won since January 23rd. It's been a while for the Blue Demons. And Seton Hall, a couple now non-covers in wins against Marquette and DePaul. So this the Seton Hall team actually now 0-5 ATS their last 5 at home, but they've won their last 2 on the road, and they get Georgetown and Butler, 2 very winnable games on the road. So that one, we'll see how much Seton Hall's laying in those games. Duke blows the doors off Wake Forest. They were laying 6.5 up 19 at the half. So Duke now back-to-back routes against NC State and Wake. That's a pretty good job there for Coach K's team. Indiana was down 2 at the half to Minnesota, and they come back and beat the Golden Gophers. Gophers now 0-8 on the road this season, and for Indiana, laying 7, they win by 10, and it's just been kind of up and down for them. They've won 3 of 4, though. They got Michigan State, Rutgers. 2 very winnable games there. Big showdown with Michigan there on February 27th and taking on Purdue, who they lost to by 12 at home back on January 14th. So Indiana, they're in pretty good shape. Tennessee over South Carolina, 93-73, and Tennessee, a team that just had totally struggled of late. Losing to LSU. They lost that game to Ole Miss on the road. They have a couple bumps here. But, beat Mississippi State and Kentucky, Georgia. They got Kentucky again coming up this weekend. So that's the look at college basketball from last night. Let's look ahead to tonight. And what you have tonight, a couple intriguing matchups. Houston, Wichita State, and the American. Houston laying 7.5 on the road. And the Cougars, this was a big game against Our Lady of the Lake. It was a nice bounce back after they lost to East Carolina. They won at USF last time out, Kelvin Sampson's team, and now they get Wichita State, who they beat by 7 back on January 6th as 11.5-point favorites. And obviously Houston's a huge favorite in every game. They're the top team in the AAC. And now Wichita State, who has not been very good against the spread, 0-5 ATS last 5. They won by 1 against UCF last week, laying 2. And after playing Houston, you get East Carolina, and then a couple at SMU, or they got SMU after that. But Wichita State trying to get back on track from an ATS standpoint, but they're still winning these games. They're winning and not covering, but all as a favorite. As a dog, lost to Memphis, lost to Houston, and they beat Ole Miss out of conference. And they won a couple games early on in the AAC against Tulsa and USF on the road. But we'll see what Wichita State can do against Houston tonight. Tough game to handicap. Iowa and Wisconsin. Wisconsin, if you look at what they've done recently, so up and down. Win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. And coming off this defeat to Michigan that they were up in the second half and then blew it. I mean, Michigan, who had time off due to COVID, and that's a really big win for Juwan Howard's team. So a couple huge home games down the stretch for Wisconsin with Iowa and Illinois coming up. And for the Hawkeyes, we have not seen them a lot as an underdog this season. In fact, just twice. They lost to Gonzaga and Illinois. So, I mean, they're playing pretty good competition there. But 2 straight wins for Iowa. Blew out Michigan State after they beat them by 6 the first time around. And now you get Wisconsin, and the two teams haven't played this season. So Wisconsin now a 2-point favorite on the road. Ohio State laying 4.5 at Penn State coming up tonight. And Ohio State, look at this run they're on. They've won 6 in a row. They just came off that victory against Indiana. And Ohio State beat Penn State by 4 in Columbus last time they played in late January, laying 7.5. And Ohio State's got, I don't want to call it a look ahead, but, I mean, these 3 home games, Michigan, Iowa, and Illinois, so Ohio State will be tested. Should be interesting to see who comes out of the Big Ten as far as just a regular season champion. But you got a lot of big games there for Ohio State at the end. Utah and Oregon State, one of many games inside the Pac-12 tonight. And the Utes, they come in off a split against the Bay Area teams, beating Cal by 1, losing to Stanford. And before that, Utah had a really good win at Colorado. They were down big in that game. But still losing to Washington, losing to Cal. I mean, Utah's got some questionable. They have not been good at home this year on the road. 3-5, but they've had some bad home losses. They've just been so they've been up and down, as their obviously the record indicates. Oregon State's dropped 3 in a row. Oregon State's last 2 wins came against. See, what's funny is Oregon State won at Oregon and USC. They actually beat USC twice. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm reading this wrong. They beat USC at home and then lost at Oregon and then lost at USC, excuse me. But got 2 wins here, covered at UCLA, beat the Washington schools, and now they've lost 3 in a row. So they've gone backwards here, Oregon State, of late. And they had, somewhat of a decent start here. A couple of home underdog wins against Arizona State and USC. So they played well at home since getting blown out by Arizona. That's 4 straight wins. Now you get Utah and Colorado. And let's move ahead. Colorado and Oregon tonight from Eugene. That's a revenge game for the Ducks. They lost at Colorado back on January 7th, 79-72, as 3.5-point underdogs. And Oregon coming off a sweep of the Arizona schools this past weekend, beat ASU by 11, beat Arizona by 2. Now they return home where they've struggled to cover the spread at home. They didn't cover it against Washington in a win. They lost outright to Washington State, lost outright to Oregon State. Didn't cover against Cal, but they did blow out Stanford here, and now they're a short dog against Colorado, and Colorado's coming off a very questionable loss to California, losing by 9 as 10-point favorites. Also, Colorado, I mean, when you look at this, they've had a 3-game winning streak snap. They blew this game to Utah. They lost at Washington. They still had a pretty good season, though, Colorado, but some of these losses, you kind of wonder. Arizona and UCLA, that's at 9 o'clock from Pauley Pavilion. UCLA laying 2. They've been terrible against the spread recently, as they've gone 0-7 against the spread the last 7 games, and they don't cover against Washington in a close loss. They lose to Washington State. They get blown out by USC. They lose to Stanford. They barely beat Oregon State, so it's been a bit of a struggle, and Cal, they beat by 4. So a bit of a struggle there for UCLA. Arizona, 0-2 against the spread their last 2. They didn't cover against Oregon State, and they lost this game to Oregon. They were down double digits to Oregon. They came back and took the lead late, but the Ducks ended up winning that game. But 3 of 4, they have lost. And Arizona, in their 2 underdog situations this year, 0-2, but they did cover against Colorado in their last opportunity. Gonzaga laying 20.5 to St. Mary's in the WCC. And obviously, I mean, Gonzaga rolling. They won their last game by 39. They have 2 games left before the WCC tournament, assuming there is a WCC tournament. And just back in the Pac-12, Washington State hosts Cal. Washington State beat Cal in Berkeley back in early January, 71-60. And Washington State coming off a home loss to Washington. They've lost 3 of their past 5. And the other Pac-12 games, Stanford and Washington tonight in Seattle. And Stanford, they've won 3 of 4. Got blown out of this game as a pick 'em against Colorado, but, I mean, beating Cal twice is no big deal. Got a nice win at Arizona here, and beating UCLA. So, Stanford, again, they've been up and down, you know. But they get the Washington schools, and then they get USC, which will not be easy, and then Oregon. So, they'll be tested in those games. And that's the look at college basketball. Let's take a quick look at the NHL from yesterday. Big win for the Panthers. They came back from 2-0 down to beat the Hurricanes in a makeup game in Carolina. So the Panthers now atop the Southeast Division. Toronto bounced back from that disgusting loss they had. They were 5-1 in Ottawa. They lost in overtime 6-5, and now they win 2-1 in the rematch. Chicago beats Detroit again 2-0, and the Blackhawks, you look at what they've done. They played pretty well. 6 of 7 they've won. So that's an impressive job for Chicago, who was predicted to finish towards the bottom of the Central Division this year. Vancouver goes into Calgary, and they beat the Flames 5-1. Nice comeback for them after they just lost to the Flames at home 4-3 in overtime. And Edmonton holds off Winnipeg 3-2. Tonight, some of the highlights in the NHL. Penguins and the Islanders from Pittsburgh. And the Penguins, I mean, it's just been like lose 2, win a few, lose 2. Like, look at this stretch. They lost 4 or 5, coming off a loss to Washington 3-1 back 2 nights ago. Boston, a huge favorite tonight against the Devils in New Jersey. They're coming off the COVID from a few nights ago. Philly and the Rangers should be an interesting game. And then out west, you have LA and Arizona. And the Kings just shut out the Wild a few nights ago. So they've won 2 in a row since a nice losing streak there. And they get the Coyotes, who are thrilled not to play St. Louis. They went 4-3 against St. Louis. Look at this, 7 straight games against the Blues. So Arizona will be at home for a while now with a bunch of these games in Minnesota, Anaheim. That wraps up the night. The last thing to talk about on today's live stream is Carson Wentz going to the Indianapolis Colts. He's reunited with his old offensive coordinator, Frank Reich. And Phillip Rivers retired after the season. So the Colts had him for a year. Now he's gone. And the Colts now with another new starting quarterback for 2021. And they went through, Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett, Andrew Luck the last few years, and now Carson Wentz. I don't have a problem with the Colts making this move. And the AFC South obviously is, when you look at the quarterbacks, assuming Jacksonville drafts Trevor Lawrence, Houston, you don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to be the guy or not. He's the guy. If he's going to be there is the question because of the trade demands. Tannehill with the Titans, and then Carson Wentz with Indianapolis. So an interesting bunch of quarterbacks there in that division. I really don't know what the Eagles made a mistake by signing him to a huge deal. And he was bad last year, Carson Wentz, but I'm always under the impression that if you go to a new team, a new system, or in fact an old system, I guess with Frank Reich, that maybe it'll rejuvenate you a little bit, and I think that could be very helpful. And the Colts need a quarterback, and the Eagles have Jalen Hurts as their guy moving forward. They think he is the next franchise quarterback. That's why they drafted him in the second round. And once Carson Wentz was not ready to come back, look, Carson Wentz took the Eagles as far as he could, then he got hurt, and Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. Nick Foles. So they think maybe Jalen Hurts is the next guy. And the Eagles got nothing in return for Carson Wentz. So if I'm the Colts, I gave up nothing, and I get a guy that's still pretty young that could be a franchise quarterback. I don't think it's a terrible move for the Colts. I really don't. So that's the look at the NFL, because the NFL never stops, obviously. And yeah, so that's what we have for today. And you can always check out the Bet and Collect podcast. You hear or you see it right here. Click on that link, and we got plenty of features for today. NHL for Thursday. You can check out this Colorado-Oregon in-depth preview with our friend Tom Cunningham. And you click on that link, and that'll take you to YouTube and his preview of that Pac-12 game. Also, you could tune into, that's me there. Look at that, college basketball, 6-0, last 6. The podcast for this week, The Great Dane Nation, with our friend Morton Anderson. Troy Aikman's on there, so you can listen to Troy Aikman, and some good stories and a lot of good insight from Troy and Morton. Morton's a really good interviewer, so you could hear that with Troy Aikman. And also Fight Night, NASCAR coming up Sunday from Daytona, O'Reilly Auto Parts 253. Michael Roberts has the video preview there, the top 5 that he likes at the road course. So that is the look at what we have going on here at Vegas Insider. So we appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel at Vegas Insider. And we will talk to you again tomorrow in case you missed it. We will have the replay up at Vegas Insider of today's live stream. I am Kevin Rogers. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and best of luck with your bets.